to Good Things with Rebecca Turner.
Well, I'm going to Mississippi, here comes.
Bringing you the good stories of Mississippi's people, places, and things to do. Now, here's Rebecca.
Good afternoon, SuperTalk, Mississippi. You are tuned into your radio happy hour. That's the Good Things. I'm your host, Rebecca Turner. We've got Ryno in studio with us today. And here's your friendly reminder that spring break is either upon you or it's upon you next week. But there's still plenty of time for you to schedule a little getaway or staycation. And all you need to do to add a little flavor to your spring break is over at visitmississippi.org. Now, yesterday we got the pleasure of talking to Mississippi's National Guard's first female Cab Scout. She was Staff Sergeant Shelby Constanzio. Squirrel. Yep. And so the reason why I'm telling you this, number one, it's a great story. You should go back and watch it on demand over at supertalk.fm or listen it in podcast form. But the other part was I felt weird calling her Squirrel because I just met her. And it feels like to utilize a nickname like that, you kind of need to know someone or at least know where it came from. Well, fast forward to after Good Things yesterday, I went to pick up some groceries at our local grocery store, and my cute little checkout guy, he was a teenage boy who was bagging my groceries. I look on his name tag, and I'll be darned, there was no name there. It just said Squirrel. And I said, what's the chances that you run into two squirrels, human squirrels, in the same day? So lucky enough, sprung up a conversation, which started with, "You're the second squirrel I've seen today," which provided an awkward look from him to me. And he shared the backstory of how he got the name Squirrel, and it was linked to sports and running around in the outfield when he was in youth sports. He's older now or whatever, but it kind of linked to with Staff Sergeant Shelby's with her running through the obstacle courses or whatever the military may have for them, and she did it like a squirrel would, kind of fast and whatever. So this got me pondering this idea of nicknames. I mean, so many of you have nicknames. There's so many groups of people who, it's almost an initiation to get a nickname. My husband worked in the oil field before we got married or when we first met, and everybody on an oil rig has a nickname. I don't know if anybody goes by their actual given name. And there's usually a story behind it, whether it's a squirrel or a cheeseburger or a frog, who knows? It's just something that you accept as being sort of your alter ego or ulterior name, and you run with it. And then you find yourself introducing yourself as your nickname to other people. Or it actually keeps it where people know you in a certain time and place if they're calling you by one name or another. Well, here on SuperTalk, we've got the producer Ryno, which is not his real name. I don't know how many of you actually knew that his mother didn't name him Ryno. And we've shared the story, I think, a couple of times here. But it was a little bit of trivia over on the SuperTalk's Facebook page and Twitter account if you knew his actual real name. And so, Ryno, for giggles, share with us the backstory of how you got really a long-standing nickname. It's almost taken over as your full identity, which is Ryno.
Yeah, and I share it with my namesake because my name is Ryan, R-Y-N-E. And I was named after a Hall of Famer, Cubs second baseman Ryne Sandberg, the year after his MVP season. So actually, we can date, I'll get back to it in a second. We can date back my namesake to a certain game known as the Ryne Sandberg game that kind of catapulted him into
that's on your birth
stardom.
Certificate, Ryan.
Ryan, R-Y-N-E. But he has the nickname Ryno. I have the nickname Ryno for two totally different reasons. I actually don't know why he's named Ryno, probably just because of the name. I'm nicknamed Ryno because I was an above-average bad child.
I thought you were going to say student, which you were too.
Well, yeah, I was smarter than the average bear, but that got me in trouble a lot as a kid because I would try to get out of stuff or talk my way out of it. I was just a bad kid. And it was always coming out of my parents' mouths, no, Ryan, Ryan, no, no, Ryan, Ryan, no, and it just became Ryno. It stuck.
Well, and it's stuck, and you also, too, with you being a more stout, burly man, you look like a rhino. I mean, you don't look like a rhino, but you look the part, right? I mean, you totally could pass off the fact that that would be your nickname would be Ryno, if you think of the animal being this just strong, massive sort of presence, and but still sweet and cuddly, because I don't know if you cuddle an actual wild rhino as
Probably
much as a bear.
Want to.
But
they're nicer than hippos.
They're nicer than hippos. They're vegetarians. And but anywho, so this got me thinking. Your chances are, if you're listening to Good Things, you have a nickname, or your spouse has a pet name for you, and they always come with stories. So we would love for you to share yours over on the C Spire text line 601-879-4395. We've gotten this conversation started, as we do most here on Good Things, over on the Good Things Facebook group, where you guys are having a whole lot of fun with this. But there's two types, I think, nicknames, right? And I think one could be your slang name, because I guess my birth name is actually Rebecca. It's Rebecca Ann Smith was my maiden name. But from a little bitty child, I was always called Becky, which that wasn't really like a nickname, but it wasn't on my birth certificate. So if you're a William, you may get called Bill. If you're a Robert, you may be a Bob. Rebecca's can also be Becca's, whatever that may be. But it took until I got married that I guess couples just exchange these sort of pet or sort of nicknames, and then they bleed over and they sort of stick. So mine that stuck, I guess, in the last probably 7 to 10 years has been Muffin, because my husband's is Puffin. I know it sounds so silly, but if you see us correspond on social media at all, which is usually some form of sarcastic banter, you'll know the friends who know us most, because they'll come to his rescue and say, "Don't be mean to Puffin," or Muffin's at it again. Again, your nickname, sort of those who know it or sort of in on it, it puts them in certain categories within your own life, because it would be odd if you and I first met and you were like, "Hey, Muffin," I would look at you like, "How do you know that, number one? We don't know each other like that, number two." And it may be a little awkward. But then there's some of you who wear your nickname, like Ryno does, as pretty much a name badge every single day. And that's how the rest of the world knows you, and they don't even realize you have a real name.
Which is kind of odd, because growing up and all throughout even high school, it was really only family and a few friends that called me Ryno. And like the group of guys I hung out with high school wise, they didn't really necessarily call me Ryno all that often. But when I got to college, it was just one of those things. The first week of college, you have that orientation. Everybody's going around and introducing themselves. And just one of the fun facts I gave was my nickname's Ryno, and it's followed me ever since.
Well, fun story for you, too, on why I go by Rebecca and I dropped Becky, was at USM, I had a grad student who was taking roll for one of the bigger classes, the stadium-type classes, and that weirdo couldn't get that Becky was connected to Rebecca, so I was marked absent all these times. And I was like, "Why am I marked absent? I'm here." And he snapped at me and said, "We don't have any Becky in this class." I was thinking, number one, if you can't connect the dots that Becky may be Rebecca, then you probably shouldn't be a grad student. But nonetheless, here I am. I'm just a freshman here. I don't know how this works. And from then on, I just started writing Rebecca things, and it just kind of morphed into that, which is my name. I mean, that is my name. But if you come up to me, there are so many who have no idea. On Facebook, it's like, "Are you Becky?" Or vice versa. They'll be like, "Why are they calling you Becky?" Because post-graduation, 2002 of Terry High School, she kind of got lost in the mix, and there was a rebirth of Rebecca during her college sort of years. And so my friends from those two different eras absolutely know me by two completely different names. And I've even have new friends now that I've made in the last, several years. They're like, I can't call you Becky. You're Rebecca to us. I'm like, "That's fine. You don't have to call me anything. You don't even have to call me that if you don't want to." But yeah, so there's always interesting stories behind that. And many of you are sharing those again over on the Good Things Facebook group. We would love to have your story there, or the text line. Melissa says her dad always called her Missilick because when she was a baby, she went from scooting to walking, and she never crawled. so she missed a lick, and then it sort of stuck. Marty says his coach in high school hated his name, so he nicknamed him Tank. I don't know why a coach wouldn't prefer Marty. Maybe he couldn't pronounce it right, so they just gave you a nickname. But many coaches are sort of the, origin of nicknames, sports, teams. Talking with Scary Gary before here, which I actually have the genesis of Scary Gary here at SuperTalk. I'll share with you that coming up. But yeah, and yours too, coming up next here on Good Things.
Your heart's been moving, melt the silhouettes till the lights come on. Melt the silhouettes till the lights come on.